Hi, welcome to the tutorial for making sense of information. This will cover, as has been hinted, making sense of information, evaluating information, what should you use, when should you use it, how should you use it in this short period of time. Of course, we can't answer all those questions, but I can hopefully provide you with a framework for deciding what's worthwhile and worthy of use in your research projects. And I should say this goes beyond just using library resources, and it also goes beyond just using web resources. A lot of times when instructors and librarians present you with schema for deciding what's useful or not, information-wise, it's reserved to just things you find on the open web. I don't feel that way. I think that these are useful criteria for anything you find, regardless of whether you find it on Google or in a library search or through connections you've made with colleagues and professionals in a field. So with that, let's look at the first schema for evaluating information. And this is the primary one I want to present to you today. And you can see next to the bullets that this spells out the acronym CARP. Another version of this, another spelling, is CRAP. I prefer CARP because it lends itself to a prettier PowerPoint slide for sure. Either way, same components. These aren't in any sort of order. The most important pieces of this will depend on your assignment and what sort of information you're looking for, and you'll know that better than any tutorial ever will. But let's talk a little bit about these 5 components. The first listed is currency. This is the timeliness of the information. This includes concepts such as when was this information that you're using for your research posted, when was it published, either way, it could be on paper, it could be online. Has this information been revised or updated, and when was that? And then this also relates to your topic in that some topics do require very current information. The example of global warming that we've used a couple times is a pretty current topic with a lot of up-and-coming research. But another topic, say maybe about a writer in the 1800s, and you need some biographical information, that might not have a lot of new research going on. So it doesn't really matter how current your articles or research might be in that case. Moving down the list, the next thing listed is authority, and this encompasses the source of the information. Where's this information coming from? Who wrote it? Who's putting it out there? What's the publisher? What's the website it's on? Who's paying for it to be put online? All those sort of things. Some of these are very readily apparent. Some of them, they are not, and we'll talk about the ones that are not a little bit later. But again, that can also lend some authority or lack of authority to a piece of information, depending on if you can answer those sort of questions. Another thing to consider is what are the author's credentials or the organization's credentials, if it's coming from an organization, for speaking forth on a particular topic. Why are they qualified? Are they qualified? To go even more basic, maybe you're finding a blog that a high school student wrote on the book from the 18th century author I just mentioned previously and what she thought of it. Maybe you're finding a blog on what some middle schooler thinks about global warming. These people may not necessarily be qualified. They may not be the best authorities. If there's contact information available in what you're looking at, you'll find in scholarly articles, those peer-reviewed journal articles we've been talking about, there's often an email address or at least a postal address for all of the authors involved. Often on websites you'll see an email address and some way of contacting people that wrote or put forth information. If that's missing, that could lend a lack of authority to what you're looking at. Moving to the second A, that is accuracy, the reliability, truthfulness, and correctness of the content. So, where does this information come from? How obvious is it? We kind of talked about that under authority. The authority may not be obvious, and this would cast some doubt onto the accuracy. Hopefully anonymous anonymous resources aren't needed. And this can depend on your topic a bit again, but there's a reason why people tend to be less credulous of anonymous stuff. They tend to believe that a little bit less because it lacks the need to be accurate. It's not, there's no person responsible for it. Is the information supported by evidence? What's the data? What's the examples being used to prove it true or false? Has this information been reviewed or refereed? And this ties back into peer review. Have other professionals and scholars in the topic area weighed in on its authority, on its accuracy, whether it's right or not? An important question, one that isn't considered very often sometimes, is can you verify any of this information in another source or from your own personal knowledge? Your own knowledge definitely weighs into this judgment and the other things you've been finding. Hopefully this is not the only piece of information that's saying X, Y, Z. Hopefully you've got other sources like your textbook or your class or another piece of information that you found that back it up and prove the accuracy. Tone and language and bias are important for accuracy. If there's a definite emotional appeal or a definite bias, that casts doubt as to accuracy. Unfortunate but true. The Fox News tagline, fair and balanced, whether or not that applies to Fox is up for debate, but fair and balanced does lend itself to accuracy in all sorts of reporting beyond news. Those are things you'll want to see. And finally, and this is one that frustrates college students sometimes, is spelling, typographical, or grammar errors will reduce the accuracy or perceived accuracy of what's being said. It's an unfortunate truth that if writers don't take care with these things, they're seen as less accurate. And you'll see that reflected, unfortunately, in your grades, and it should be true as well in the things you're finding online or elsewhere for your research projects. All right, next letter is R, and that stands for relevance, the importance of the information for your needs. Does this information relate to your topic or answer your question, or is it something tangential? So if you're finding, like I mentioned before, a high schooler writing a blog post about a lit class where she read something by an author that you're researching, that's pretty tangential. That's not really on point. Something to consider from the point of view of the information you're reading. Well, who's the intended audience for that information? A high schooler's blog is probably maybe her friends from high school, maybe not the audience of your instructor. It's not written for a research paper perspective. And then this can also go to the appropriate level. Is this written at the appropriate level? Is it something that's really basic or something that's very complex? Going back to global warming, looking at an elementary school level book on global warming versus a peer-reviewed article on carbon emission scrubbing in coal-fired plants. There's a definite level difference there, and that difference can come into play with the relevance of information for your particular research project. Another thing that plays into relevance is looking at a variety of sources before selecting the ones you're going to use. And we've discussed this in previous tutorials. It's great to dig and find lots of information, as much as you can, really, if you have the time and the energy and the ability to dig around for the very best pieces. There's never going to be that perfect piece of information, but finding the ones that are the most appropriate and match your purposes the best is the way to find the most relevant pieces of information. And the final judge of relevance is your own comfort level. Do you feel that this is a worthy thing to cite in your paper or your project? And you know that better than anyone. You've got that gut feeling whether or not this is appropriate or not, and that plays into relevance a lot. So the final letter is P, and that stands for purpose, the reason the information exists. What's the purpose of this information? Informing you about something, selling you something, teaching you something, entertaining you, or persuading you. These all have their roles, and based on your assignment, any one of these might be appropriate, but it's good to know the purpose of the information. And it's also good to know whether the authors or purveyors of the information make that purpose clear, or if it's somewhat hidden. This ties in with whether or not the information is fact, opinion, or out and out propaganda, trying to sell you on a particular point of view without considering alternatives. Does the point of view of the information appear objective and impartial, for example? And what are those biases? Are there political, ideological, cultural, religious, institutional, or personal biases that are apparent? All these things, like I said, have a bit to do with your assignment, a bit to do with what you're trying to do as an author or a presenter or a creator of a research project. And they can all weigh in differently, but they should all be considered when you're evaluating the things you find as to their proper use and role. And a good way to know what factors weigh in and how they weigh in is by doing what is called sometimes pre-search. And this is the preparing for your research. That's why it's pre-search. It's smooshed together. And it's knowing what you need or what you want before you even get to the research stage. We talked about this a little bit with keyword brainstorming, that you sit down and write down a list of terms that describe your topic and things, ways to narrow things down, like years, date spans, or geographic areas. This is very useful as well for evaluating the information you find and how well it fits into your needs. What you'll want to do is think about your topic. We've already talked about that with keywords. Think about your topic. Think about how you describe it. Maybe do a little examination as to how other people have described it through Wikipedia or through Google or through your class notes or class resources or talking to professionals or practitioners in a field. But another component of this, and a very important component, one that actually ends up frustrating students the most, is understanding the assignment. Understanding the assignment is key. What do you need to accomplish with this assignment? And the library can help with that, but the best person to help with that is, of course, your instructor. And instructors sometimes think their assignments are crystal clear, and as frustrating and perhaps intimidating as it may be, it's your job as a student to ask the questions that help the assignment become clear to you and help you find out what you need to complete the assignment correctly. And this is a big component of making sense of the information you find in your research. So my recommendation to you when you are finding things, again, apply that CARP test. Put things together along those 5 factors of currency, relevance, authority, accuracy, and purpose. And then make sure you know what you're looking for with regard to your topic and with regard to your assignment.